Hello YouTube. So today I've got a really simple plyometric progression that you can use for any lower body injury. So plyometrics is jumping, the ability to generate force, and obviously a very common part of a lot of sports and is very important in mid to late stage rehab. So I'm going to run through the framework I like to think about when I'm programming and using plyometrics for lower body rehab, and hopefully you can take away some useful bits of information if you're struggling to start incorporating some jumping or some more dynamic movement into your rehab and you're not sure where to start and how to progress it. Okay, so I'll just make myself a little bit smaller and then I'll just run through a quick analogy that I like to use. So I think of it in a 4-step process. So number one, I'll just move myself out of the way a little bit there. Number one, we can start off on the floor on our backs. So straight away, instead of starting jumping from a standing position, regress it, make it a lot easier, and start by lying on your back. Now you may be asking, Fred, how do I do jumping on my back? Well, you lie on your back, you have your feet up against the wall, so flat on a wall, knees slightly bent, and then you can push off from there. So you can do little hops, you can do this on double leg, or you can do it on a single leg. So some variation of what's called a wall pogo. So this allows you to actually get some load through the calf, obviously all the lower limb for a variety of different injuries, and it's just slightly lower load than jumping, and so you can manage that pain score and actually build up some tolerance there before progressing on to standing. So once you've nailed that, you're strong enough, pain's down, etc., etc., you've hit all the benchmarks that you need to hit, dependent on the injury. Number two, what I like to think about is we are going to go into a standing position, so you're going to be doing some jumps stood up, but what I like to think about is the height of the jumps to be as low as possible, and actually what's more important is the frequency of how much you're doing it. So what I tend to program here is loads and loads of jumps, but again, we're not jumping particularly high, so we're keeping nice and low to the ground. So if you think about like a double leg pogo where you're just hopping on both legs, I wouldn't be encouraging someone to jump ridiculously high with this. I'd just be thinking stay on the balls of your feet, and let's say in one set, let's get 20, 30 reps in, and just do loads and loads of sets. Just get the body used to it. Okay. Once we've gone through that stage, we've got that nailed. Then I'd be in the same position, so I'd still be stood up, obviously, but I would then increase the intensity by increasing the height of the jumps. So that's number one. Then I'd also start to introduce some movements where we are moving a bit more dynamically, laterally, and rotating as well. So like bounding, so side to side, and then also dropping into lunge positions and then chopping across the body with med balls and things like that. So we're getting those 3 planes of motion if you think about it. So sagittal plane, which is up and down, then the frontal plane, so we're doing some lateral bounding side to side, and then the chops are transverse plane, which is across. So the body needs to be able to move in these 3 different planes. It's not designed to just do one thing and move up and down. Okay, so that's really, really important. And then if we go on to number 4, I'll just put myself out of the way there, get that, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. So there we go, number 4. Now what I would think about in this stage is obviously still stood up, but I just have a little think, can I make the plyometrics specific to the sports I'm wanting that person to get back to, i.e. the plyometrics are going to look different if the person wants to get back to football and rugby compared to weightlifting. So in that case, I would be thinking weightlifters need to be they're exposed to load in a very different position. So if we think about sitting in the bottom of a squat, I know this is a very poor drawing, but imagine that is someone sat in the bottom of a squat. Obviously, the knee, the hip, ankle, etc., etc., have to be able to take load in these positions, and obviously very fast, very heavy loads. Whereas football and rugby, arguably higher loads, but obviously most of it is being taken stood up. So in rugby, that could obviously be from any position when you're running, and a football change direction, similar thing. Okay, so potentially for the weightlifter, I would be using more deep tier plyos. So plyos where we're actually sat in the bottom of a squat, in a deep squat, astergrass, and then we're actually jumping around in that position. Yeah. Whereas with a football and rugby player, I'll be thinking, we need to introduce a lot more sprinting, change direction, drills that are more applicable to the sport. Because obviously, generally speaking, in football and rugby, we're not receiving big weights from one direction in this deep squat position, which is obviously very specific to weightlifting. Yeah. So that would be stage 4. I'm thinking about how can I make it more specific to the sport, and then from there, it's just returning to the sport with minimal pain. So that's just a really simple 4-step process. Again, there's no specific exercise there. It's more just a framework because I found that to be incredibly useful. So again, to summarize, starting off on your back, bouncing off the wall. Then number 2, we're stood up, but low intensity. So not jumping really high frequency. Number 3, still on our feet, but we're increasing the intensity by jumping a little bit higher. And then we're introducing some lateral movement. So some bounding and some chops and stuff as well. And then number 4, we're thinking, how can we make this more and more specific to the sport? What are the demands of the sport? How can I be most prepared to meet those demands? Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. If you enjoyed it, just drop a comment down below with any criticisms, suggestions, or things you want to see in the future. And subscribe to the channel for more injury-related content and training stuff.